So, if you're anything like us, perhaps you enjoy watching wild birds from your patio window. We know we do. As you can see, our feeding stations are very close to the living room, to the patio window, which can create a bit of a problem. Not only do we get sparrows, house sparrows that is, occasionally a hedge sparrow, we also get blue tits, great tits, dunnocks, woodpeckers, and other visitors. We have Tom, a robin that frequents our establishment, blackbirds, the female hen blackbirds, or brown birds, whatever you want to call them. Whilst this fellow is a Reeves pheasant. He's been visiting us for the 3 years that we've been living in this establishment. Even while the development has been going on all around us, he still comes along frequently. We call him Donald. That is, Donald Pheasants sounds like Pleasance. Donald Pleasance was an actor, by the way. They are Reeves pheasant has the white head, beautiful plumage, and apparently the tail feathers grow to up to 8.5 feet long. Now, we've never seen more than about a 2.5 foot length with Donald, but who knows? Occasionally he loses them, but we've never seen them grow longer than 2.5 feet. Nevertheless, my, what a handsome gentleman he is, eh? Our tiny garden is also frequented by wrens. We've had coaltids, warblers, and 3 times at least this year I've seen a sparrowhawk, one of which landed about 3 feet away from me, frightened the life out of me, and frightened the life out of the sparrowhawk as well as he landed on the bridge I'd just built. And thankfully on this occasion, the sparrow he was chasing, or she even was chasing, got away. We've even had a squirrel as a regular visitor. In fact, 2 turned up several days in a row back in the summer. Haven't seen those for a little while, mind. And when you consider that the nearest tree is, or mature tree, is 5 minutes walk from here, they've travelled some ground to get here. But of course, the problem with having your feeding station for the birds so close to the patio window, occasionally a disaster does happen and a bird gets frightened by a passing passerby or a passing vehicle and flies into the patio window. As yet, we haven't seen a serious injury or death, thankfully, but you never know. They could perish from their injuries later on, of course. So what can we do about that? Good question, but I think I may have come up with a solution. Now, being as we rent our lodge, it's a bit of a tricky situation because we can't affix anything to the structure. Therefore, I have to find a way around things, and I have become a bit of a master of freestanding structures. So the first thing to do really would be to ascertain exactly what we've got. Well, we have 4 corners. We need to put the net, the covering over the window. So I'm looking at the 4 corners now to see precisely what we've got. I can affix something to the bench for a start. I have my fence on the other side that I can fix something to as well, which I've erected. So that's not going to be an issue. Luckily, I have some pieces of timber kicking around, which I knew at some stage would come in useful for something or other. So I shall run this piece along the edge of the frame as an upright and affix it to my work table, or workbench. It's actually a garden bench that I made out of an old pallet. And I'll put a little bit of a flat base, another offcut, which I shall affix with a screw to the table. And then put a what's called a London bracket. That the blue handled thing is a bradawl, by the way, to make the holes, make it easier. And just screw those into place. Then I shall go to the other side, not in a spiritual way, I mean the opposite end, and affix a piece of timber there on the fence. I haven't had to buy anything for this project, so I'm just using bits and pieces I've got lying around the house. Here we have an assortment of brass hooks and eyes, some garden wire. The hooks don't have to be brass. The more sturdy they are, the better they're going to be. So I screwed those into the timber. Next, I'm threading the garden wire, the galvanized garden wire, through the eyes, leaving plenty of length in order to cut off what I don't need. It's always best to have too much rather than not enough. This I affixed to all four corners on each of the eyes, running one length at the top from left to right or right to left, whichever way you want to do it, and vice versa at the bottom, left to right, right to left, from left to right, right to left, either way. Confused? I know I am. But I always have been. Anyway, it just so happens we have some pond netting kicking around, a 2 metre by 3 metre length in fact, which turns out to be ideal for the job in hand because it's a 2 metre drop for the patio window. So lay it out on the ground as best as possible, and you're going to need a bit of framework for either side. In my case I used garden canes. Used garden canes, that is, as you can probably see by the mud on the end of them. Then, if like me, you haven't got canes that are going to actually be long enough for the 2 metre drop, I've got to join them together to make 3 canes, and they need to be held together with something or other, such as string or wire, or good old trusty gaffer tape. Gaffer tape is the simplest option though, believe me. Once you've done that, thread the canes through or weave it in and out of the netting and roll it over slightly so you can tape it all that together to the netting as well, which will hold it in place. Your next job is to hang the netting in front of the window on the wire. I simply use plastic curtain hooks, which work really well, and are weatherproof of course. Et voila. Well, not quite actually, because it was too close to the window. So I had to make an alteration, as all good designers do, or should do anyway. And I had to extend, use extension pieces, basically 8 or 9 inch lengths of timber, which I screwed to the original timber that I fixed the eyes to, and then fitted eyes and hooks on the end of that timber, and Bob's your uncle. My mistake should have been obvious beforehand, of course, but it wasn't. Somebody with a brain would have worked it out, but somebody with part of a brain like myself obviously couldn't. And I needed a gap between the window and the netting, because if any bird is to fly up and contact it, there needs to be a little bit of give, bit of cushioning, so that it will automatically turn the opposite direction. So that's what I had to do, to put some extension pieces to make a gap behind the netting, as you can possibly see. And because there needs to be that certain amount of tension and spring in it for the birds to bounce off it, I had to do something with the centre section to pull it taut, and I simply cut a couple of 8 or 9 inch lengths of timber, cut a V shape in the end of it to fit on the wire, and it's held in place on its own. No nails, no screws, nothing, just sheerly the weight of the net, which isn't very heavy. In fact, the net curtain is as light as a feather, and in fact only feathers should be touching it, so hopefully all will be well. I used a couple of bolt keeps on the end, which I screwed to the timber in order to push the cane into, to hold it in place so it can act as a curtain, which is the intention behind it as well, in order for us to get in and out of the patio door. So there you have it. If the birds happen to fly from their feeding area into the net, they will hopefully, all being well, bounce off it or make very light contact with it and fly away without any harm. After all, we have a responsibility as bird feeders to look after birds and protect them from harm and injury which could be caused through our fault. Then from the inside view, you can see it's not quite the same as it was. However, we can still see the birds and anything else that may come into the garden, and we have less stress involved. Say anything else, there's a mouse by the looks of it. Oh, indeed it is. So we can watch our little animals quite contentedly as we did previously. Well, that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope that you enjoyed this little video. Of course, it is a bit of a spur of the moment thing. It took me about 5 minutes thought beforehand how I was going to get around doing this, and it's a bit Heath Robertson, as I've said, but it doesn't have to look like that. You can tidy it up so it's going to be a permanent structure if that's what you intend. Good luck to you either way.